In today's episode, I get to talk to the incredible Dr. Kayla Osterhoff. She's a neuropsychophysiologist, former CDC scientist, and founder of Her Biorhythm, a platform dedicated to advancing women's health and addressing gender disparities in research, education, and policy. Her pioneering work is closing critical gaps in women's health, research, and reshaping society's understanding of it. This conversation was so exciting and powerful for me. I've been following Dr. Kayla's work for such a long time, and the way that she breaks down the female cycle, but really champions research on women's bodies, therefore getting us results and getting us, even dosage, what is actually working for women. She's an absolute champion in this space. And so it's no surprise that she's actually a manifester. She's a 4/6 emotional manifester, cross of rulership. And this incredible researcher, this incredible woman, I was so pleased to learn in this interview that she is right into human design and she's keen to actually look into potentially doing a research piece, which I am excited to hopefully work with her on. Now, she is so in alignment with her design. The cross of rulership is really all about redefining power. And in this moment in history, what are we doing? We are redefining the balance of power because we've been way out of balance in the masculine. We are rising the power of the feminine to bring in equilibrium, to bring in balance and more so harmony in the universe with the masculine and the feminine. Also, being a manifester, she's really on the edge of research. She is one of the people that is striving to have women included in research pieces, understanding the female body, understanding that the female body is different, almost every day of the 28-day cycle, and then being able to design research around that, which is very extensively expensive and challenging because of the way the female body changes so much. I think it's fascinating that she is a emotional authority because, again, I think women have been accused of being overly emotional. Women have been accused of, being inconsistent or unreliable. And yet this incredibly powerful researcher is an emotional authority. So she shows the power of what emotional authority and that emotional decision-making, what a powerful example of that looks like. She also has the 12-22. So when you're listening, if you're anything like me, I've heard her on a number of podcasts before, and I was there listening to every word she had to say. And of course, that 12-22 is very powerful in getting people's, buy-in and attention. So on that note, her core talent is the 64, which is the gate of confusion. This is also that gate that it's I like to think of it as the big universal dump. So all this information gets dumped in. She has the 47. So what that sort of says to me is that she's here. A large part of her work is to rewrite the patterns, rewrite our identity, who we think we are, rewrite the history books so that we can move forward in a more resourceful way. Her personality sun is the 26. And again, I think one of the really powerful things looking at this incredible woman, she's been interviewed on a number of podcasts and a lot of men's podcasts where they are really wanting to understand women from this core place that she really talks about. And I feel like the 44-26 is very much this incredibly powerful channel for bringing to light important issues to move the tribe forward. And of course, the 26 is a very, very persuasive energy. All right, I'm going to let you get into today's interview, so I'll leave you to it. Enjoy the interview. Hey, everyone, and welcome to today's episode. On today's episode, I have a guest that I think I heard for the first time about 2 years ago, and I was like, what? Why is no one talking about this? So I'm so excited to have Dr. Kayla Osterhoff here with me today. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited for our conversation today.
Yeah, I'm so pumped. I think I am like my other passion. I'm a manifesting generator. Oh, and listeners, Dr. Kayla is a 4-6 emotional manifester, cross of rulership. And of course, you're coming to me on this day. I'm interviewing. So, the cross of rulership is all about redefining power. Like, it's this really powerful leadership cross that's moving from the old paradigm of, I'm powerful and you're weak, and moving to this new empowered paradigm.
Mm,
And it's exactly the place that I'm in my life right now. And that's what we do. We call in the incarnation cross that we need. So this is no
wow.
surprise that we would be chatting today.
Oh my
Um,
gosh, so amazing.
yeah, yeah. So my other passion is, longevity. So this is kind of where I started to realize that, women aren't really a part of most of the research.
Yeah.
We are kind of like a secondary thought almost when it comes to all sorts of medicine and research.
Yeah.
So when I heard you talking about all of this and talking about how we differ in our cycle, I was like, wow, I cannot wait to speak to this human. So I'm super excited. It's been a while for me, a bit of a wait. Um, but before we get into all of that, I'd really love to hear a little bit of, what made you who you are today. I strongly believe that we all have a dark night of the soul. We all have
Oh,
this moment where we're like, and if you're like me, you have a few, but this moment where your soul calls you to this journey. Like, okay, this looks bad, but actually you have what you need inside of you. Come follow me, and this will become your purpose. And I'd just really love to hear about that story of, perhaps from the dark night of the soul to this, incredible woman that's sitting in front of me.
mm. Yeah, thank you for asking and being interested in that. I think, like you, I've had many. I think I started out with my first at a very young age. Growing up, I was one of four kids, and we were a very low income family. And so, things were rough when it came to financial well being. And on top of that, there was some addiction and mental health things that came in and out of my different family members that really affected my childhood and made it kind of a very chaotic environment. It made it a very unstable environment, albeit very loving. Like in my family, we had a ton of love, and I feel like that was my saving grace, was that there was no lack of love in the family, but it was just very chaotic, and very ungrounded. And
Mm,
so from a really young age, I became kind of the grounding force for my family, and also became, unfortunately, a parent to my parents and to other adult members of the family that I shouldn't have been a parent of.
yeah.
And it kind of turned me into a really serious kind of a kid. And my dad would always say, "Why are you so serious?" And looking back, I understand why now, but at the time I would be like, "Oh, well, I'm not trying to be serious, I'm fun too, like everybody else," but I wasn't really able to express that side of me.
Yeah.
Um, and I became a very kind of type A person, wanting to control everything around me, because I didn't have a lot of control as a kid with my environment.
Yeah.
So I was a very good student, and I was always the best at whatever I decided to do, and very competitive. I always had to be the best at everything I did, whether it be grades or whether it be sports or you name it, whatever it is, I had to be the best or be the top of whatever that was,
Mm,
which wasn't necessarily beneficial all of the time, and put a lot of pressure on myself. Um, and so fast forward into undergrad, where I was studying to become a physical therapist. And then I had probably my biggest dark night of the soul, or like I like to call it my biggest awakening moment that happened. And that happened in my junior year of college, of undergrad. And at that point, my mom had a overdose, her first of several, with opioid prescription medication. And it was a complete shock to myself, to my system, to our whole family, because she was so high functioning and carrying the weight of so much that we didn't know that there was any problems going on. And so that really kind of shook me to the core. And going through the process of trying to get her into rehabs and get her the help that she needed when we had no resources, it was just a really difficult time for all of us. So at that point, I had switched my focus and my career idea from physical therapy, and I wanted to go and work on the opioid epidemic at CDC, because I wanted to be on the ground and make some change here, because I was so dumbfounded that something like this could happen to my mom and be fully prescribed. Like, she was taking all the medications as prescribed and still overdosed and still became addicted. And so I knew that there was a big problem with our medical system and the way that we're prescribing drugs and the way that we're treating health, and really, destroying it at the same time. So I switched gears and I went and got my master's in public health, and with the goal of going to work for CDC. And so when I graduated, I pretty quickly did get the job at CDC, and I moved across the country from Reno, Nevada, where I grew up, to Atlanta, Georgia, where I live now, to work at CDC, where the headquarters is. And while I was there, I got to do all kinds of amazing work in global health mostly. So I got to work on many of the emergency responses. So I don't know if you remember Zika way back. That was the first emergency response I worked on. And then I got to work on both of the Ebola responses in Africa.
Wow.
And then I got to work a little bit for a short while on the COVID response before I retired from CDC and went fully on my own. But while I was there at CDC, while the work was amazing, it was also problematic in the fact that I was noticing that these discrepancies and these disparities in women's health specifically, and not enough attention, funding, research, information going into this space. And as a result, women are suffering, not only in this country, but worldwide. And this became very apparent as I was working there, and it was not in alignment with me and what I wanted to do in the world anymore. At the same time, it was a corporate environment. And so, as you know, and as all women know, even if they don't consciously know, they know that the corporate environment does not align with our bodies, with our brains, and how we operate as women. And so I was really burning myself out. And at the same time, I was training and competing in duathlon. And actually, during my time at CDC, I made Team USA and was competing on the national global level. And so I was really burning the candle on both ends. My days would look like waking up at like 4 a.m., riding my bike to work because I needed to get a certain number of miles in and I didn't have time in the day. So I would ride my bike to commute to work. And then once I got there, I would go straight to the CDC gym, have a full workout, and then be the first one to my desk so that I could leave as the first one in the afternoon, ride my bike back home, and then sometimes I would go for an additional run once I got home so I could fit in all my training.
Oh my God, that's
and
intense.
then when I finished that, I would start my studies because I was also working on my PhD. So I was really just wringing myself out.
Did you end up burning yourself out?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yes.
I was going to say, that's a lot for anyone. Even if we're talking about human design, even for sacral beings, that's a lot. For a manifestor, wow.
Yes, absolutely. And I, as a manifestor, and as you know, I don't have all the motors and all the energy that other people have. So mine was sheer willpower, and that runs out. And so, yes, I totally burned my body to the ground. I had full on adrenal burnout, very severe. And I also had full hormonal burnout. When I got my female hormones tested, they were at the same level as like a 70-year-old woman.
Wow.
And yeah,
that is
so
not good.
no. So that was just a complete lack of self-awareness at that point, and not understanding my design, not understanding the best way for me to operate, and also not understanding my female body and how to operate it the right way. And it took me a long time to come back from that and reverse that. And it really took that deep understanding of my female neurophysiology and the unique aspects of it and how to operate it the right way, which is what I ended up getting my PhD in. And that's what I teach and research now.
Which I want to dive straight into because I think it's fascinating. But there's a lot that I got from this podcast. I think it was Luke Story's podcast that I was listening to a couple of years ago. But there was something for me that was an absolute groundbreaker. And I will tell anyone who listens, like I've mentioned it here. I've mentioned it in HDX, my community. And it's this idea that the masculine energetic cycle is 24 hours and ours is 28 days. And it's this whole it seems obvious, but when you actually take that out of just being something we know and put it as a frame that we live through, like all of a sudden everything shifts. Like I often refer to it through the frame of success. You know, we're taught that success comes from consistency, and consistency looks like doing the same thing every day, but it just doesn't for us. Like it just doesn't. And, you know, like I'm a manifesting generator and I'm emotional and I'm a line 3. Like my consistency could not be any more different than a 24-hour energetic cycle. So that, I just think even that simple knowing was so profound for me to understand that, you know, we will achieve the same things, or we will achieve our potential just as well as a man will when we start to realize how differently our energy is expressed.
Oh, absolutely. I always say that, first of all, the whole idea of consistency is the key to success, which how many times have we heard that? How many times did our parents tell that, and our mentors and our teachers and elders, whoever, right? Because that is the belief across our society. But the truth is, consistency is the key to success for men, because consistency in the way that we have it defined, which is a daily repeating cycle, it works for the male biology, for the male biological rhythm, because it is that 24-hour repeating system. But for the female biological rhythm, it's that long 28-day. And so little by little, we're actually changing, shifting each day. So each day is different. And we go through 4 significant phases of different neurophysiological setting in our body, so much so that I always say that women are 4 different women over the course of the month. And then when we can learn who those 4 women are, how best those 4 women operate, and how best to support each one of those, that's where the magic happens. And I also like to say that the female biorhythm and the female biology, it's not a limitation. It's actually the greatest biohack that you could possibly have. And we can actually achieve a lot more than our male counterparts, even when they're working consistently, if we can leverage the different ebbs and flows of different cognitive capacities, of different metabolic, energetic levels, of different aspects that come online during each one of these phases that we can use for our success. That's really key, but it takes a shift in the way that we think. And it takes moving away from the cultural conditioning that we've been given since we were children.
Oh, I love it. And I'm pumped. I want you to go through, you know, these 4 stages. However, I just want to kind of jump in before we go there, because I actually went through early menopause. My mother didn't do it. And, I look back because it's nearly, it's probably like 8 years ago now.
Yeah.
And I look back and I just know I was burnt out. Like it was my
Yes.
entire body going, you have nothing more. You have nothing more to give. There's nothing more to create. Like, stop it, back down.
Yeah.
But I didn't. So I did end up, going through menopause. So, how does all of this shift once we go through menopause? I mean, I know
Yeah.
personally it was a real challenge for me that I did not see coming, because I've
Yes.
always been very fine with aging. However, the information out there is so negative
Yes.
on menopause and, like, aging. Um, but from your perspective, I'm really curious, like, what's your frame on, post menopause, most
Mhm.
post-menopausal women, and how best to work with our energy?
Yeah. So, first of all, let's describe what menopause is in a way that we were never taught, but is the truth. Really, what's happening in menopause, perimenopause, menopause, that whole shift is the major regulatory system of the female biology, everything. So, we're talking what regulates our brain, our nervous system, our cardiovascular system, our respiratory system, our musculoskeletal system, our metabolism, our immune system, everything is regulated by the ovarian hormone cycle. This is why we have a 28-day-ish, right? Every woman's a little bit different. There's a lot of variation. But this is why we have a month-long biological rhythm. So what happens when we go through menopause is our master regulatory system, so that ovarian hormone cycle, is passing over the baton to the adrenals to take over the lion's share of the load. Not completely, but mostly. So here's the big issue with menopause. And if we could solve this one thing, it would take care of 99% of menopausal issues and symptoms and all of that. And that is to have healthy adrenals so that when we go through that shift, that our reserves are there. So it
Mm,
makes perfect sense that you had an early and very difficult menopausal experience because your reserves were gone. So when the baton was trying to be passed over, there was nobody there to pass it to. So it
mm,
fell on the ground,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um, and so if we can start to better understand the female biology and better support it so that we don't burn ourselves out, so we don't make the same mistakes that I made, that you made, that most women make, because we don't understand our bodies and how to feed it properly and how to work it properly and how to support it properly, we burn ourselves out. And the adrenals are the ones that take the hit first. And
Mm,
then when the adrenals get super burned out, then your female hormones take the next hit after that. And then
mm,
it's kind of a downstream thing from there. There's the thyroid, there's neurotransmitters, there's all kinds of things that get fully dysregulated once that starts to happen. And it causes a whole myriad of symptoms and issues that can turn into long term chronic issues if it's extended over time. So, this is not, of course, what we're taught about menopause. We're taught it's something that all women have to go through, and it's a sign of aging, and it's terrible, and it's going to come with all these symptoms and hot flashes and mood swings and whatever. And that's not actually the truth. It can
mm,
when there's dysfunction, but a healthy menopausal shift would not come with those symptoms, and that would not be normal. And so for us to normalize those things is really wrong. And it's a
mm.
lazy way of saying, essentially, we don't know what's going on with you fully and we don't want to figure it out. So we're just going to say that's all normal under the label of menopause.
Yeah.
So that's also me. That's me on my soapbox because this is one of
I
the
love
things
it.
that
I
makes me
love your
so
soapbox.
upset.
I
Yeah.
think it's brilliant.
And
And I think that, that's what we need to be empowered with.
yeah.
Like, I think I had one of my friends, because I wrote a post on it, and a friend of mine reached out and she said, best time of my life, and I remember thinking, oh my God, that is a completely different perspective,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
post-menopause, I'm like, wow, and I'm an emotional authority too, and my
Mhm.
emotions are so much more balanced than they were. Like, there's so
Yeah.
much upside of it, but we don't
Yes.
talk about that.
No, we don't talk about that. And yes, it is something that all of us women, as long as we get the opportunity to live a long life, we will all go through that shift. And energetically, there's a few things. So when we think about the female biological rhythm, it's this month-long rhythm, and we'll go through what that means in all 4 phases.
Yeah.
And especially during the actively cycling years, which is the vast majority of our lives. It's the whole big middle chunk for women. Um, and so what happens is during that time, the ovarian hormones are kind of setting the pace and the tone of all of the rest of the biological processes, regulating things, keeping things set to a certain pace, right? And when we go through the shift into menopause, we don't then just become men, and our operating system doesn't shut down and become a male operating system at that point. It's still a female operating system. It's still influenced by higher levels of estrogen and progesterone that are a lot higher than men, even post menopause. And what we're finding now, which we don't have, we have mostly anecdotal evidence of at this point, because we're not studying female bodies and we're not trying to understand this, which, is another issue.
Yeah.
But what we are finding through the accounts of women, and something that you could probably relate and attest to, is that even postmenopausally, women still have about a month-long biological rhythm. So what I mean by that is their mood and their mental clarity and their energy levels and their sleep quality and all these different things that ebb and flow throughout the month still ebb and flow throughout the month, even post menopause. So then it's like a little bit of a head scratcher. So what's happening there? Why would we still be having this month-long full biological rhythm, even though the pacemaker of that has stopped ebbing and flowing like it was before? And while we don't have hard evidence to understand what the answer is, my theory, and what we need to start researching to fully understand the mechanisms of, is that because that is the vast majority of our lives, that our bodies learn to operate this way, that they continue to operate this way afterwards. Now, what's really interesting, and something that I don't know and nobody knows because we're not looking into it yet, is this a chicken or the egg scenario, right? Does actually the whole female biological rhythm run on this month-long cycle, and then the ovarian hormones just kind of tapped into that and are part of it? Or are the ovarian hormones responsible in driving the whole thing? We actually don't know which
Yeah,
it is.
wow. Oh my God, that's fascinating. Are you looking to build a successful human design or astrology business? Do you wish that you had your own chart tool on your website so you don't have to send people somewhere else to get it? BodyGraph.com provides all the resources you need to turn this vision into a reality. We use this incredible software in our business to provide charts and custom reading reports at the click of a button, generate leads, and bring in lots of passive revenue. BodyGraph.com has already helped coaches and entrepreneurs generate over $2.5 million in revenue. If you're ready to take your business seriously, start with a free trial and use the code HumanDesignPodcast to get 30% off for 6 months. Here's what you can do with BodyGraph.com. Embed stunning charts directly into your website, build personalized lead magnets to grow your email list, create and sell detailed reading reports, and even use their free website builder to get started fast. BodyGraph.com is the ultimate all-in-one platform for building your human design or astrology business. If you're ready to join the community of successful entrepreneurs, visit bodygraph.com and start building your dream business today. Follow the link in the show notes and use the code HumanDesignPodcast to get 30% off for 6 months. And and it kind of leads me, and I do want you to go through the 4 phases, but it does lead me to this whole topic of, research and how little research is done on women. Is that actually starting to, I was going to say rectify itself, but I think that's getting ahead of myself. Like, are we starting to do more research that is inclusive of women now?
We're starting to make progress. So, going through the COVID experience really brought this issue to the forefront in terms of letting us know as a world that this is actually not just a female health issue, this is a global economic issue. And what happened is when we went through COVID, women started fleeing the workforce at mass, right? And we thought that once the world opened back up and we opened up childcare and schools and all of that, that the women would come back into the workforce. Well, they did not. And in fact, they're still leaving the workforce. And it's causing a huge global disruption. It's a huge economic issue around the world. And the reason behind this, what is driving this whole thing, is a lack of data and information so that we can understand and create systems and structures and policies that actually properly support women. That's what we're missing. So if you look at the research, starting back from the beginning of scientific inquiry, right, 1,000 years ago or more, in the way that we do research today, whenever that started, it was mostly male researchers, and it was male educators, and it was also studying the male biology, the male body. Even in animal studies, we were studying the male body because it's more simple. It's cheaper, it's faster, and that's all we care about today is fast, cheap data. And the best way to get fast, cheap data is to study male subjects because it's a lot less complicated, like way less complicated and way, way cheaper. So while I understand all of that because I'm a researcher myself and I study women exclusively, and it costs me a heck of a lot more money and a lot more time and a lot more resources, it still has to be done.
Yeah.
So in 1977, the FDA, because of this reason and also because of women's childbearing potential, which is, an ethical excuse to exclude women, they excluded women fully from clinical research, and that didn't get overturned until 1993. And unfortunately,
that's crazy.
It's absolutely insane that was even possible, and that was actually part of the law. And unfortunately, what the US does and what the FDA does, the rest of the world follows. And honestly, they had already been doing it that way to begin with, so it wasn't anything new. That is already how they were conducting research. So in 1993, the NIH opened up the Office of Women's Health, and they started saying, okay, we should start studying women. Like, this isn't right. We have to start including women in research. So at that point, they started advocating for that. And about every 5 years since 1993, they put out a new report stating the progress and pitfalls that have been occurring in women's health research. And basically, up to today, very, very, very little progress has been made to rectify this issue. However, we are starting to include women in studies now. And in the last 5 years, bigger strides have been made, again, since the COVID issue, because once you bring to light a real economic issue, then you get people's attention, right?
It's just crazy, like hit them where it hurts. But hello, like, how is this only something that just started to move 5 years ago? Like, that's not okay. Like, how is that even possible?
It's not okay. And unfortunately, now it's become more of like a buzz thing. And I don't know if it's the same in Australia. I'm sure it probably is, where there's a lot more focus going into women-owned business. There's a lot more focus going into women's research and trying to get more data on women. And this is all great. However, unless we acknowledge the sex differences, and unless we really understand what those are and conduct the research appropriately, we're still completely failing. We're taking a full face plant, even though billions of dollars is being thrown into this. Just for one example, many of the studies that we are now including women, they're including women, but they're not reporting the findings by sex.
Oh my God, you're kidding.
No. So it's a very, very small percentage.
Are they not reporting it by sex just because it's too expensive to split the data out and get the different, like, is it like that?
It's that. Yeah. So it's that. And it's because if you're going to study women appropriately, you have to be able to control for the hormone cycle, meaning that you have to put a lot more time because you have to study women over several cycles, first of all, which
Mm-hmm.
nobody's going to spend the time to do. Not to say nobody, but it's very, very expensive to do that. You can't just take a point in time measurement with the female body. And if you do, you still must know, you must identify where in their hormone cycle are they when you took that measurement, and then try to take the same measurement or the measurement at the same time for all the other women in the study. So again, it becomes extremely complex. And I will say, it is very, very difficult, very laborious, very frustrating. That is all true, but we have to do it. So
Mm.
if we're going
Do
to
you
pour
know?
billions of dollars,
Sorry to
yeah,
interrupt you, but do you know, the first thing that comes to mind
yeah,
is that imagine if this was men. If men had the complex body, we would not be having this conversation right now because they would have worked it out. You
no.
know, 1,000 years ago, they would have worked out these differences, and it's, I don't know, it just really frustrates me that, even the solution is being done in a freaking patriarchal way. Yeah, let's just throw lots of
Yeah,
money at it. No, we need to slow down and get into the details. We need to
yeah,
actually do this in a feminine way. We need
yeah,
support. We need to really understand what we're doing. We need to. I find it so frustrating because, again, we're still trying to solve this new problem that shouldn't be a problem now
yes,
anyway, but we're still
yes,
trying to solve it in the old way instead of
yes.
really, like what you're saying, is no, we have to do it properly.
Right. And if we had more female leaders and female leadership, and women who are leading in a feminine way, then we would be able to solve this problem a lot faster. So, just one example is myself and a group of other women, scientists, doctors, and other kinds of physicians, are working to try to create different policies so that we start to reform the way that we do research with women. And so, this is what we need. We need more policymakers to be informed. We need more healthy, balanced female policymakers and leaders who can start to shift the way that we're doing things. Because even the way that we do research, like you said, it's a very masculine, male perspective. The fact that we want to just go ahead and do a point in time measurement, we're just going to ignore all of the differences, we're going to ignore all the complexity and just pretend like it's not there so we can roll out the data as quickly as possible. We're really missing the mark. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, women are paying the price.
Yeah. Oh my God. Like, there's so much here to dive into, but I'm really conscious. I want everyone to hear about these 4 separate women that we are each month.
Of course. So I'll just run through the female biorhythm and the 4 different hormonal phases that align with 4 different neurophysiological phases. And that's why I talk about it as the whole biological rhythm rather than the hormone cycle. So even if you go into, PubMed and you want to learn something about the female biorhythm or the interaction between the ovarian hormone cycle and all these different systems of the body, you really have to look it up by each topic. And it's going to say menstrual cycle, but really the correct term is the biological rhythm, the female biological rhythm, because it's a global physiological system that is set to the pace of the ovarian hormone cycle, but again, is much broader than that. And unfortunately, women's health today has been relegated just to reproductive health and has been focused just on menstrual cycles and reproduction rather than understanding that there's a whole full biological system that is completely different than our male counterparts.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, there's a whole different human in here, people.
There's
Pay
a whole different
attention.
one. Yeah. It's there's a whole different one. And of course it's so complex because why? Because the female body is responsible for creating new life, which is a complete mystery and miracle in and of
Yeah.
itself that our bodies can do that. So yes, there are more moving parts, because we have to do much more complex operations with it. So starting in, we'll start from phase 1, which is the menstrual phase for women who are actively cycling still. And this phase is marked by the lowest estrogen and progesterone. So these are the two key driving hormones of the ovarian hormone cycle. There are other ones that I'll mention, but these two main hormones are the ones that are ebb and flowing throughout the majority of our lives and kind of regulating and setting the pace of all of these other global physiological systems. So when estrogen and progesterone are at their lowest level, what happens is the whole female neurophysiology takes a little bit of a downshift. And so, this is why we as women oftentimes feel like we have less energy. We might feel like we have brain fog during this time. We definitely feel like we don't have the capacity to do what we can do in other times. And that is correct and accurate. And it's natural and it's supposed to be that way. But we're not taught that. And so we push against it. And here we go down the burnout cycle. So what happens is on a deeper biological level is when those hormones are at their lowest point, our metabolism slows. So what happens is our conversion of food, so macros, fats, carbs, proteins, into fuel, ATP, through the citric acid cycle to generate the fuel for our cells, that whole thing slows down. And so there's less fuel available for our bodies during this time. At the same time, if we look at what's going on in our brain, again, there's a downshift happening here, and our excitatory and mood boosting neurotransmitters are decreasing in their activity during this time. And so those are things like epinephrine, norepinephrine, glutamate, serotonin, dopamine, the things that give us a elevated or controlled mood, and the things that also give us mental energy and focus. So those are also slowing down during this time. And so all of that kind of sounds like not very fun, not a very fun experience. And it's also like, why do we have to experience that every month for about a week? It doesn't seem fair. But if you zoom out, and I think you'll understand and have an appreciation by the time we go through all 4 phases, it's actually a beautiful cascade of events that is so intricate and so detailed and so many moving parts, but they all fit beautifully with each other. And there are gifts and benefits that can be leveraged in each one of the phases as long as we understand what's happening, as long as we understand how our resource levels are shifting and changing so that we can allocate our resources the smartest way, but also leverage what's happening for us in every phase. So in this phase, the body is literally slowing down and it's taking our focus, our attention from external to internal. We have to pull it internally, otherwise we get burned out, right? If we don't slow down and we don't pull the internal focus from external to internal, then we start to burn through our resources way faster than the amount that we have during this time. And what's really interesting is that during this time, we also have a heightened sense or a heightened intuitive sense. So this ability for discernment, decision making, assessment is heightened. Our cognitive capacity for these types of things are heightened during this time. So actually, if we think about it, how beautiful is that? Our body is literally directing us towards the things that we're going to be better at during that time period. So then from that phase, we go into the second phase, which is the follicular phase, which is a building upon the menstrual phase. And this is marked by a steady rise to a peak in estrogen specifically. So as estrogen rises to a peak, so does our metabolic function and conversion, the fuel of the body, specifically glycolysis, glucogenesis, these types of, and also lipid metabolism, lipid oxidation is higher during this time. And so our metabolism is converting our food into fuel. Our actually caloric need is higher. So we need to be fueling our bodies more because our energy requirements are higher, but our energy output is also higher during this time. And our excitatory and mood boosting neurotransmitters are on the rise as well. So we're starting to feel more mental clarity, more focus, more stamina. At the same time, our body is literally getting stronger. And so we're able to have higher power, strength, and endurance during this time period, which peaks at the next phase, which is the ovulatory phase. So this is when estrogen peaks. At the same time, we're getting a nice surge of luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone. So this is a really hormonal time. And because of that, some women actually have PMS type symptoms during ovulation when all the hormones are really high. And that is due to a lack of ability for the body to detoxify these hormones properly. So a lot of women will say, wait, if I'm reaching the peak of my power, strength, endurance, neurotransmitters, metabolic function, energy, why do some women not feel so great during that time? Well, that's also why, because we're not understanding how do we support those higher hormonal states.
Yeah,
But
wow.
yeah, but the vast majority of us feel really great during this time. This is
Yeah,
our best time of the month. We
yeah,
feel like we can do everything. We're superwoman. And in fact, we really can do everything. We have more endurance. We can work longer hours. We can carry the load. We can push our bodies. And our
yeah.
bodies can handle it during this time
You know,
period.
it's so fascinating because listening to you, I'm just sort of reflecting on my own experience. And I think I like this phase is the phase that I would almost convince myself that that's the phase that I'm meant to be in all the time. And I'd be
Yes.
trying to push myself
Yes.
all the other stages to be that version
Yes.
of me. And now I definitely see I'm still, I still have the phases, but now I'm older and wiser. And I'm like, yeah, nah, like
Mhm.
this is my recovery time. And I also
Yes.
love that, in the slow down time, the recovery time, in that phase that we go internal, that instantly as you were speaking, I'm like, this is the time we listen, this is the time that we actually
Yes.
listen and receive, like, so it's so deeply feminine. I love that.
Mm-hmm. It is. And exactly what you're saying, this is the pitfall that we all have as women is we get to that point where we feel our best and that's where we set the bar and we say this or better. And
Yeah,
it's absolutely not possible. It's not sustainable. And what it does is it burns out the adrenals. And this is why we have a burnout epidemic with women across this entire earth because we're not understanding what, even at the basic level, at least if we could understand our energy metabolism and how that changes over the course of a month, we could do a lot better for ourselves if we just understood even that one component.
yeah. And I love, like, even what you were saying about women leaving the corporate world, so quickly. I mean, it's definitely my experience because so
Yeah.
many of those women are my clients.
Yeah.
And, I think as an entrepreneur myself and having built a business literally around my energy, I mean, that is so empowering to be able to
Yeah.
recognize, okay, well, I get to actually build it the way I'm designed, energetically. So I love that. I think it's so beautiful that women then get the opportunity to go, well, these are my phases, and, we're about to
Yes.
get to the fourth, but, and then being able to build business around that and then overlaying their human design. I mean, especially like a non-sacral
Yes.
being like yourself, like really understanding that your energy, your inconsistencies, they are going to be like almost, for me, I can kind of battle through because I have this sacral energy. But for you, what a gift to go, okay, cool. No, I really need to recover or play in this time. And, I
Yeah.
will be off the charts in this time over here, and trusting and knowing that, you'll have just enough time and just enough energy to do exactly what you need to do. So you got to
Yeah.
honor that downtime.
Oh, 100%. And, learning my ebbs and flows as a manifester type and being on the emotional wave
Mm.
and not having that consistent energy and then having my female biology ebbing and flowing at the same time, it's been a real challenge. And I
Yeah.
won't say that it's something that I fully mastered
Yeah, I don't
yet.
think we ever fully master like the
Yeah,
emotional wave.
yeah.
I just don't think we do.
It's rough, and sometimes it can be really rough, especially when I'm in one of those down cycles in my biorhythm and it matches with the down cycle of my human design. It
Mm,
can be a real challenge because we have all of this pressure in our own minds, to perform, to try to be perfect, to hit that bar and maintain that bar. And even though I know better, I still have that voice in my head that says, you can't afford to rest.
yeah. Yeah. And that's where we need to rewire our behavior.
Yes.
That's where we need to change our
Yeah.
identity. And it's, through the work that you're doing, that's really helping women give ourselves permission to actually be who we are. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
beautiful. What's the fourth phase?
So the fourth phase, I always say this is my favorite phase, but I think I say all of the phases are my favorite phase because they all have their own benefits that are so powerful. But the fourth phase is the luteal phase in the menstrual cycle. And this is the longest of all the four phases. It's about the whole back half of the biological rhythm. It's the last 2 weeks. And this is marked by mid part of this phase, progesterone peaking while estrogen is back down and low again. So it's switching. The star player of the first half was estrogen. The star player of the second half is progesterone. So with progesterone, what it offers is when it rises to a peak, it also starts to change some of our brain chemistry in really important ways. And so it boosts our GABA neurotransmitter, which is our down regulatory neurotransmitter, our master down regulatory neurotransmitter. It also helps to stimulate and boost our ability to get quality sleep, to
Mm.
consolidate memories, for myelination of our nervous system. And at the same time, we're getting a nice boost in neuroplasticity and neurogenesis with BDNF, so brain derived neurotrophic factor, which also is boosted during this time. So it's interesting. Again, it's such an intricate dance of different things that are happening because as we go through this phase, our nervous system is becoming more and more sensitive. But with progesterone, it's kind of like our body throwing us a bone and saying, okay, I know you're becoming more sensitive to stress during this time, and your nervous system can't handle as much, but we're going to give you progesterone, and we're going to give you which is basically a natural anxiolytic. It's an anti-anxiety because
Mm.
it's helping with that down regulatory process. It's helping with sleep regulation. It's helping with restorative capacities that happen while we're sleeping, and it's also boosting our brain's ability to learn, adapt, and grow. And so
Wow.
I love that this is a whole 2 weeks of the process because we get this brain boost during this time. And again, I call it the brainy phase because our capacity to learn, grow, and adapt is heightened during that time period.
Oh my God, I love that. And, I think, like, I'm sitting here just thinking, God, aren't our bodies amazing? They're just
Yeah.
so amazing how they can, like, troubleshoot, like, hey, look,
Yeah.
you have less capacity, so I'm going to make sure I'm giving you what you need to down regulate. Like, that is just so, so, so brilliant.
Yeah.
So, other than kind of feeling our way through, how do we specifically know which phase we're in, and then so that we can kind of follow the
Yeah.
phases?
So you can do it different ways. My favorite way that any woman can use, whether she's postmenopausal or maybe she's on some kind of birth control where she doesn't have an active period, or maybe there's another reason why she doesn't have an active period, and that's a big population of women. So it can be hard to track based on the period, which would be the obvious, easiest way because you would say, okay, that's phase one, and then you can count from there.
Yep.
But what I like better is a journaling methodology, and that is to start to track some of these things that are most obvious to you. So, for instance, if you're a woman who experiences PMS, which again, PMS is not actually a thing in and of itself. It's like menopause, where it's a collection of unexplained symptoms that women experience. And it can also just act as a catch-all for any negative symptom a woman experiences prior to her period. Oh, it's PMS and it's normal, even though it's not normal.
Yeah.
So you can look at the things that you might experience in that PMS time period, like fatigue, brain fog, irritability, pain, things like these. And what you can do is, those are good metrics for you to track across the month because they'll be the most obvious for the changes. So let's say one of your biggest issues is moodiness at certain times, right? And so you can track your mood by just journaling quickly. Let's say you want to do like mood and energy level. You can just do a 1 to 5 scale every day in your regular journal practice. Say, mood, what is it? 1 to 5. Energy level, 1 to 5. Then you can do other things like sleep quality, nervous system sensitivity, heart rate variability, respiration rate. There's a lot of things that you can do. And just pick a couple that you can start tracking. And then you'll notice the peaks and the valleys. And those would be phase 3 and phase 1. And that's when you can start kind of reverse engineering and counting and figure out where you are. So it'll take you a couple of months to start to see a pattern because you have to go through a couple of cycles. But you'll be able to start identifying at least phase 1 and or phase 3. And then you can start to see how long your biorhythm is, and you can start to pay attention to the other qualities and aspects of it. And as you start to align your lifestyle with these different phases, you will start to notice some of these benefits that we talked about. You will start to notice some cognitive shifts. You will start to notice a higher capacity generally. Like, you'll have a higher capacity to accomplish things and be able to get things done in a lot shorter time when you understand where your resources are and how to apply them the most smart way.
Oh my God, I love it. I'm also sitting here feeling great empathy for all the reflectors in the world that have been taught to go out and follow the moon through their chart every month. I'm like, I feel like we're getting some of our own medicine right now. Like, yeah, okay, I can do this. I can do this too. Yeah, I love that. And like for me, I just see all the possibilities of that. How, like I was the primary caregiver, I was studying, I was starting a business, I had young children, and the whole idea that I was not designed to show up the same way every day, and that actually I have full permission not to do that. Like, far out, that would have set my younger self free. I tell you what.
Oh my gosh, yeah. This
Yeah.
is what we need on a societal level, is even if we're not providing the deep education like this, and it goes a lot deeper than what we're talking about today, but that's not even required. To make a huge change, we really need to do one thing, which is, one, for ourselves, offer ourselves some grace to be flexible. And then what we need on a societal level is flexibility. If we can just offer women flexibility to do things on a timing and a operating pattern that actually works for us and supports us and feels good, we will be very successful. We will be able to do even more than we can do now by just pushing ourselves through.
Yeah.
And so we have to get past that little fear and take the leap of faith and say, okay, we're going to provide flexibility for myself, for other women, and I'm going to trust that it's going to overall be a positive change. It's going to actually increase the capacity of humanity. Because if you think about it, we have a whole half of the population, 51% actually, that is having a little bit of a handicap right now because we don't understand our bodies. We're not using them the right way. We're not supporting them the right way. And so we are dampening our own capacity because we don't have the right information, education, and support. And so the changes that are needed are actually not complicated changes. They're simple changes, but we have to get past that fear.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Oh my goodness. I could talk to you forever. I have so many questions. You actually, on the podcast I was listening to, you explained how the brain and the mind are different and how they work together. And I really wanted to get to that, but I'm conscious that we're out of time. Do you have time just to explain that? Because I just loved it. I'm
Sure.
like, I want that
Yeah.
on my podcast so that my listeners have it.
Yeah. So, I'm a neuropsychophysiologist, and a lot of people are like, what in the heck does all of
That's a
that
big
mean?
word. Yep.
It's a big word, and it's way more complicated than it actually is. And what it is the study of the brain, of the mind, and of how those things are wired through the nervous system to create human experience and human health. And so when we look at, that's kind of the big picture for all humans. That's our human operating system, right? We have a mind, we think. That's the psychology piece. It's the intangible, invisible part. Like if you ask somebody to identify where their mind is, they can't do it. We as scientists haven't figured that out yet. We haven't been able
Yeah.
to identify what the mind is or where it is, or we know how to kind of work with it as a medium, but we don't really get what it is, and we definitely can't pinpoint where it is
I just
because it's
love
that
that. It's
intangible
so
piece.
cool. It's so
Yeah,
cool. It's like, I've heard people say like it looks like our mind actually sits in the collective consciousness. Like that is so
yeah.
cool to think about.
It's really cool because there's definitely a collective mind, you could call it, that happens. And we can explain that through different kinds of phenomenon where population levels of people are thinking the same things, or different trends happen at the same time, right? That's unexplainable and kind of a weird phenomenon, but
Yep.
it's explainable if we understand that it's this intangible medium that we're all working with. And yes, we each have a different lens, but that's the hardwiring, that's the brain, and that's the nervous system. So the brain is different than the mind. It's the actual tangible mechanism, and it's electrical and chemical in nature. And with that, it creates the lens through which the mind medium is filtered through to create how me, Kayla, perceives and experiences. And so, what I think is really fascinating about all this to think about is how does human design interplay with all that? Maybe human design and the astrological positions and how the energies were when each physical being was born actually created this very particular filter, this very particular brain, and this very particular nervous system that filters and works with this mind medium in such a way that it creates the personality of Kayla, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so it's all playing together. And I think human design is such a beautiful way to um, describe and put a system that's workable around that piece.
Yeah. I love that. So my theory is because I'm a behavioral coach and a profiler, so I've used a lot of profiling tools in the past, and we talk about they're all behavior and personality. And behavior and personality is something that we create, right? We create who we are. My theory is that our human design is our energetic blueprint that actually informs that behavior. So when
Mm-hmm.
we understand our human design, and I overlay the gene keys because of the, from shadow to gift to acidic state. So there's this journey. And
Yeah,
as a behavioralist, like we're not two dimensional, we have growth, we have a journey.
yeah,
Um, and for me, I think that when you look at it that way, everyone, is to some degree, they're all expressing their design, but are they expressing it from fear or love? And then that creates the
mm-hmm.
identity, and then the identity creates the behavior. But yeah, my theory is
Yeah.
that the human design sits below that. It's actually what's
Wow.
informing everything. And I do believe that at some point in the not too distant future, people will start researching the biological um,
Yes.
informing as well, because the gene keys are all very closely related. The
Mm-hmm.
I Ching that the gene keys are based on, we now know that they are mapped to the human codon. Like we're starting to see
Yeah.
that there are these very obvious correlations. So yeah, I think that we will get to a point with human design in the not too distant future where we see that it really is informing everything, informing our DNA, informing, so much, everything that we are.
Yeah. I would personally love to see a couple of different studies related to human design. One would be to look at the neural correlates of different designs and profiles, because I do think that it has an influence on the physical design as well, because it's all interplaying together. And I wonder if certain types, maybe it's as simple as, manifestor type versus generator type has a different neurological um, blueprint that starts off. Or maybe it's more related to the different profiles and authorities and all of these. I'm sure it all plays in, but it'd be interesting to look at that, as in terms of how the brain operates, that electrical function of the brain, how it fires and wires together, which we do know at this point that it's different for males versus females, which is a whole other conversation we can have some other
I'll
time.
have to have you back. Yeah.
Yeah. But also, I bet there are neural correlates that could be measured for different types of designs and patterns that emerge physically with the nervous system, with the brain, with different types.
Yeah, I let's do this. I don't know
Yeah.
how, but I think because like one of the things that I talk about as well, and I can't remember who I learned it from. It's not my original thought. It's from one of the other human design teachers. I think it's Karen Curry Parker.
Mm.
That we talk about in generators and manifesting generators, that we do this thing called functional burnout versus burnout. When the non-sacrals, like the burnout, they're on the couch, they're flat on their back.
It's very
Whereas for
obvious.
us, we don't know. We just literally lose our passion, our lust for life.
Yeah.
We just like unplug, if you like, but we can still turn up and do all the things. So it can be very, like you don't know it's there until it's like really smashing you in the face, because our energy will just keep going on this very, very subconscious level.
Yeah.
So it'd be cool to be able to see those biological differences.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think yeah, it sounds exciting. Maybe we should
Yeah.
definitely talk. We should
It's
talk more
really
about
interesting.
this.
I mean, I've definitely seen that and witnessed that in my friends, because I am most attracted to manifesting generators, because when I'm with you, I get all the energy that I never have when I'm by myself. And so all of my closest friends are manifesting generators. All the people I spend my time with are manifesting generators, because somehow I get to like piggyback off of your energy. I don't know exactly how that works, but and so I've seen that functional burnout many times, because we're both kind of burned out, but mine's so obvious. There's like no working around it. It's just like done. There's nothing else that can be done. I have to check out. And even though my manifesting generator friend that I'm working on a project might also be in the same position, but she can just keep cranking it out, even though I know she's exhausted, but she's still able to do it. Whereas I can't even try.
Yeah, and exactly. And I think that is something that's fascinating to look at, because I know for me personally, like I've pushed myself to burn out a number of times, and I've actually done it once just out of sheer enthusiasm. I've just loved what I'm doing so much that I'm like, I'm just going to keep going. But no, I still end up, and it's not that I can't turn up, but I just noticed that my passion's gone, and also the quality in which I show up in all areas of my life. So it's a hard boundary for me, like to really look after myself, because I want to be the best version of me for me and for everyone else. But yeah, I think that would be such a fascinating research to do, because I think from my perspective is once we understand each other's design, we can be like, oh God, obviously that makes sense now. That's why you and I don't operate the same type thing. But and if we're having these big breakthroughs at this level, imagine what we could see, what's going on biologically, because that'd be such a massive impact. And again, for our children, like all these little non-sacral kids that are being burnt at both ends because they're doing music and sport and all these things, and they just need to come home and rest, like really teaching them how to look after their bodies early on would just be so powerful.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I think back now, I actually read Ra's Manifester. He wrote like this paper, this big long paper about the trials and tribulations of a manifester, because he was a manifester. I read it, and it rang so true, especially as manifestor children, because there's like this immense pressure, but we don't understand it, but we feel it, but we don't get it, we don't understand, and then we're not typically supported to be initiators or be independent or be the leader, even though we feel a pressure to do it and we kind of go towards that, but our environment doesn't allow us. So it's always constantly stunting us, stopping us, stopping us, stopping us. And for me, what that did is push me away from my strategy to inform, into a point where even to today, I am a terrible informer because I'm afraid of people stopping me if I tell them. So I like to just do it. But then, it pushes people out and makes them like shocked, like, oh, what are you doing? Why didn't you tell me? And so it's like this conundrum. And if people could just understand these little nuances, and if you could understand that about your children, oh my gosh, it would completely change parenting. And then overlay understanding sex differences on top of that, we'd have a whole different world if we could.
I know, right?
Accept these differences between people and celebrate them, rather than trying to make everybody the same and standardize everything.
Exactly. And I think that ultimately that's what it is. It's about us being the authority in our own lives, us, being sovereign beings, getting away from this old conditioning of we all have to be the same into, what human design is called the science of differentiation, like actually really getting to know ourselves as well as we possibly can, and to love, trust, and accept ourselves, because when we do that in here, then we can do that out there. And I think so often we're trying to fix things out there, but we have to fix them in here first. And I just feel like human design is such a beautiful way for us to really align to our authenticity. And when we love it in us, then we're going to see it and, serve others to do the same.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love it. So good. So thank you for your staying with me for a couple more minutes.
Of course.
How do people get in touch with you? How do people work with you? Let them know where to find you.
Sure. For anyone who's interested in learning more about the female biorhythm and understanding some of these different components that we talked about today on a deeper level, you can check out herbiorhythm.com. That's my website, and you can also contact me through the website. And then on social media, I share all kinds of free information and interesting research that's coming out on women and different perspectives. And so you can connect with me there as well. And that's Dr. Kayla Osterhoff.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here. I've loved every second of it, and I think we do have to do a part 2 at some point. So
absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
And thank you everyone for being here. I trust you got what you needed from today's episode. I know I got loads. So thanks again, and I so look forward to having you on the next podcast. Bye for now.